12,000. But kind of typical of this territory. That was not a challenge. 12 is the challenge. Unless I'm working from home. Because it's even fewer steps to the back.
Break room's closer.
When I come in house,
You got water back there. How far is it?
Yeah, it's between Monroe and Adams. Oh,
Yeah.
it's on first.
I mean, it's easier.
City.
Here you go.
No, we are.
Hello.
Eat
Bringing it for everyone?
I did, but we have to put it in little toothpick
All right.
size bites.
That's fine. That's fine. That'll work.
Everybody has to share. Let me know if it's stinky. I might put it on the floor because I don't like a wadded up bag. What I was worried about driving here is I'm like, I got plenty of time or.
I know. There's so many.
We have quorum. Whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon, members of the MAG Transit Committee and the MAG Active Transportation Committee, and welcome to the annual joint meeting in person for many of you. You look great. As a reminder, please turn on your mic and clearly state your name before speaking to ensure that members of the audience can hear you. And please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for all attendees. I still make that mistake now and then. If you're phoning in, please use *6 to mute and unmute, as well as *9 to raise your hand. So I'm calling the meeting of the MAG Active Transportation Committee order. Kay, will you please take roll call?
Thank you, Chair. I will begin roll call virtual attendees in order of agency. Elaine Mariol.
Present.
Kelsey Shatnick.
Present.
Ward Stanford. Allison Felice.
Present.
Brandon Forey.
Present.
Marielle Brown.
Present.
Stephen Esther. Sam Stevenson, proxy for Chase Wallman.
Present.
Thank you. And Grant Anderson.
Present.
Thank you. And I'll continue roll call with members present in person. Tiffany Halperin. Randy Proch.
Here in front of you. This is so weird.
Thank you. I can't see them. Sasha Pachito. Earl Ratledge.
Here.
Jose Macias. Thank you. Justin Weldy.
Present.
Thank you. Stephanie Bubenheim.
Present.
Thank you. Patrick Sage.
Present.
Daniel Loftus.
Present.
Reed Kempton. Garrett Topham.
In person.
and Jason Harris. Tara Harmon. Stephen Chang. Marty Zeke,
Present.
and Chair Susan Conklu.
Here.
And did I miss anybody?
William from Peoria is here.
Thank you.
Kristen Taylor from Surprise is here online.
Did you already go through both committees?
No, this was the Active Transportation Committee. Chair,
Okay, got it.
we have a quorum for active transportation.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
This is my part, right? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting of the MAG Transit Committee is also called to order. Hannah, will you please take roll call?
Thank you, Chair. I will take roll for the Transit Committee, starting with our virtual attendees. Jill Dusenberry.
Online.
Thank you. Matt Dudley. Jeff Graves.
Present.
Thank you. Nathan Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Tony Flood. Heather Wilkie.
Present in person.
And I'll get you a nameplate. Thank you. Ratna Corpella.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kristen Taylor.
Here.
Thank you. Sam Stevenson.
Present.
Thank you. Gabe Elias.
Present.
Thank you. Grant Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Sean Banda. And now I'll call those in person. Jason Crampton.
Here.
Thank you. Jose Macias.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair Link.
Here.
Thank you. Reed Kempton.
Here.
Thank you. Jody Sorrell.
Here.
Thank you. William Beloit.
Here.
Thank you. Carol Ketcherside.
Present.
Thank you. Chair Sapien.
Present.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Hearing none, Chair, we have quorum for Transit Committee.
Next, we have call to the audience. An opportunity for public comment on the agenda was provided ahead of the meeting. MAG staff, have we received any public comments?
We did receive 3 comments submitted to the Active Transportation. I'll go ahead and read those.
Yeah.
Thank you. First comment from Sharman Pullman from Mesa. Active Transportation Committee, good afternoon. I would like to bring attention to a few of my concerns regarding county within Maricopa County. As a native Arizonian and someone who has lived in Maricopa County my entire life, I am extremely disappointed with the way my tax dollars have been spent. For my hard-earned money to go towards such an ugly and inefficient form of transportation as the light rail is disheartening to say the least. I used to often visit downtown Mesa since the implementation of the light rail. It is the last place I want to be. Having only one lane to drive down turns a short car ride into a hassle. The streets are congested, yet people would still rather drive their car than use the light rail, as you can see the empty light rail cars every. Commuting by car is my preferred choice of transportation, and I can guarantee that most other Arizonians feel that I have the freedom to leave when I want to and go anywhere I want, whereas public transit is often very limiting. No one wants to use this public transit when they have such a much more reliable and effective mode of transportation sitting in their driveway. These complaints about the light rail are now at the front of my mind because of the new light rail loop being proposed in Phoenix. This proposal not only creates a more challenging time for drivers, but also creates a public safety concern. Due to a report I recently read, crime has steadily increased around the Valley Metro Light Rail since 2016. To my understanding, the route of the loop will go directly along, quote unquote, the zone, or the largest group of homeless in the city. You are kidding yourselves if you think that any average citizen and commuter would willingly choose to ride on this light rail. Aside from safety, how much is this going to cost the taxpayers? I am accustomed to the government spending my tax dollars in useless ways, but I would ask for these legitimate current concerns to be considered before any more egregious transportation plans are made. Thank you for your time. That's end of first comment. Second comment from Kathleen Lyles, Mesa. Forcing people to move by foot, bike, or transit will keep people in their homes. It's over 100 degrees half the year. How do you expect people to freely move about in that? And what about the elderly, the infirm, the disabled? Leave us our freedom to move. End of comment. And the last comment from Susan Blood. Beginning comment, forcing me to be more quote unquote active by limiting my ability to drive is government overreach. My level of activity is my individual right and my business alone. Taking away my right to move about freely in a free country sounds like communism to me. Stop trying to control us. End of comment.
Chairs, I have one comment for Transit Committee from Carol Steins from Phoenix, Arizona. Begin comment. Transit use has declined and it was already very low. It seems irresponsible to increase spending on public transit when obviously there is no need for it. Please don't just go along with the EPA. Stand up for Arizona citizens. End comment.
Thank you. Next item, Transportation Planning Program Manager's Report. Audra Coaster Thomas, MAG Transportation Planning Program Manager, will provide a report on activities of general interest.
Thank you so much, Chair Conclu. I echo your sentiments. It's so great to see so many people I haven't seen in person over the last few days. Thank you for joining us. And on behalf of both Chair Sapien and Conclu, so happy so many of you did decide to join us in person today. This is our annual gathering session between the active and transit committees, because so much of our work has mutually beneficial value. Several years ago, the chairs of both committees sought it meaningful to gather once a year to talk about interests that cross both committees. And so today we have an agenda that does just that. Happy to bring you back here or invite you back in person after, of course, the pandemic as well. I have just a few other reminders and announcements for the benefit of both committees. For active transportation in particular, I want to remind you that the call for projects for design assistance is now open and will be through 10 a.m. on June 30th. Design assistance program is something that MAG feels strongly about as a way to partner with member agencies to identify opportunities to advance active transportation projects by doing a project assessment. As a reminder, these are intended to be short-term projects to be concluded within 18 months. That's going to be a focus in working with our member agencies and consultant partners to make sure those projects move efficiently. They are currently funded with federal dollars, for which we're very cognizant thereof. The online portal and guidebook is available on the MAG website, specifically on the Active Transportation Committee website, and you can access both there. If you have any questions, of course, you can contact Kay Bork offline. Also wanted to announce that we are not planning to have either active transportation or transit committees next month of July, as is tradition at MAG, to take the month off. And then finally, as all of you are acutely aware, our top priority here at the agency continues to be enabling legislation for continued of Proposition 400. That remains our top priority, active and ongoing conversations. And I'm sure you've been following the news coverage, particularly over the last couple of weeks, continuing to be a top priority of the governor and legislature. If you have any questions, you can certainly talk to John Bolin or myself offline. With that, chairs, I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you. Item number 4, multimodal mobility. An example from Rochester, Minnesota. This item will be presented by Jamie Wilson, Project Manager in Administration at the City of Rochester, Minnesota. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Read these bios. I'm sorry. Go ahead and read.
Please,
Okay,
please.
sorry about that. So Jamie Wilson is a project manager in city administration for the city of Rochester, Minnesota. She primarily works on destination medical center projects, including public infrastructure and public realm projects. She has also spent the last few years involved with micromobility programming with a focus on bringing new options to the central business district in downtown Rochester. Jamie has her master's in business administration from Augsburg College in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and is project management professional certified. To allow time for all presenters, please hold your questions and we will have a Q&A at the conclusion of all presentations today.
Thank you. Can you just let me know if you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for that introduction. My name is Jamie Wilson, as mentioned, and I will just share a little bit about our experience here in Rochester with what we're doing with really multimodal mobility, and with quite a bit of this we'll spend time talking about some of the micromobility programs. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So as a quick overview, a couple of things I'll talk about is why it's micromobility is particularly important here in Rochester, what we've done to create some infrastructure to support micromobility, and also some of the other modes of transportation, and then also what sort of programs we've created to support our community members. Go ahead to the next slide. Keep going, one more. Thanks. So just as a little bit of an overview for us, when we talk about integrated transit approach here, we've got a real desire to focus on moving people and not on moving cars. So right now in the downtown area of Rochester, within a, I think it's like a 5-minute radius walk, there's 3,500 public parking spaces. So we spent a lot of time over the years figuring out how to get people in their cars into downtown. And that doesn't include, I don't think that includes all of the Mayo parking ramps. Some of those are a little further out, and I don't think that we counted those in the, most of them are for employees only, so those weren't included. So instead, what we're trying to really do is figure out how do we make it a better experience for pedestrians, a better experience for bikes, how do we have better transit, how do we set up policies that are going to help us do this. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we did a study a couple of years ago. It's been a little while now, it's about 8 years ago. And what we learned is that the way that people currently get into downtown Rochester at that time was that 71% of people brought in a personal motor vehicle. So we had the other 30-ish% was a little bit on transit, some who walked or biked, and then a few who carpooled. But for the most part, we had most people who were coming into town driving their own vehicle. And as I just heard in some of your comments, it sounds like there's similar issues other places where people see that as their most flexible way of getting around the area. And for us, what we have recognized is that between 2015 and 2040, the plan is that we will almost double the number of people working in downtown Rochester. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with Rochester, we have one very large employer. We have the Mayo Clinic. And the Mayo Clinic currently employs about 45,000 people here in Rochester, between 40 and 45. And then of course there's other surrounding areas. So they actually have a much larger employee population, but here specifically we're between 40 and 45,000. Now, obviously, since the time of this study, we've had a little pandemic happen. So it has definitely changed the face of how downtown looks right now. We do have more people who are working remotely, but it doesn't change the fact that in order to do patient care, you have to have people who are at the bedside, who are in the buildings, who are doing that work. And that's not only true of patient care, but it's also true of the extensive research that happens here. So while these numbers may look different than what we originally thought in 2015, the reality is they are going to continue to go up. And that being said, we recognize that what we really need is to have a mode shift. So in 2040, our goal is to have less than 45% of the population driving a personal motor vehicle, upping that transit to about 30%, encouraging people to walk and bike. And one of the ways that we're doing that is really by creating greater population density in the downtown. So that's helping with that ability to walk and bike. And then also to just continue to encourage people to carpool, which can be a tough sell. Next slide. So one of the main large initiatives happening in Rochester right now is the creation of a rapid transit system. So here in Rochester, the decision was made that this would be a bus rapid transit system instead of a rail-based system. And we really spent a lot of time thinking about that and why we might go either route, but this is the way that it ended up. We had a lot of people who would have loved to have the rail. We ended up just making the decision and getting support from our city council to do this as a bus rapid transit. And this primarily serves the downtown area, but on either end of this route is a transit village. So on the west end, there's a West Transit Village, which will actually allow about 2,500 people to park there. And then at the other end, I think it's closer to 1,500 to 1,800 people. And then there'll be 11 stops total along this route. And this is just a route that can carry 100 to 120 riders. And at the peak times of day, it'll be running on an every 5-minute cycle. So very quick, highly predictable, and giving people that opportunity to drop off their car, not bring it into the central business district of downtown, where real estate is at a prime, and it's going to continue to get more and more difficult to get there. So how does this fit in with our other pieces with micromobility? One of the key things that we want to do at those, oh, sorry, go to the next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself. As we talked about station placement and how this works within a micromobility structure as well, we really want to make sure that those stations are in some of the most dense areas as far as population density, which would help encourage people's ability to just walk to a station. We want to make sure that it's easy to walk and bike, particularly to the transit villages, because those will be places where there'll be bike parking, there'll be places where you could park a scooter, any of that. We want to make sure that it fits into the surrounding that's already there. So in this case, we've really been thoughtful about where we put this line to make sure that it fits into, it's already on a major street. We're not going through any neighborhoods. It's already on an area that's pretty busy. And that was part of the decision around why to do bus instead of doing a rail line. We also are looking at placemaking along the line. There's lots of opportunity in this area, both to create housing and to expand on the retail needs in that area. And we also already have some really great park space that's quite close to the West Transit Village, and we continue to work on some of that space on the east end. And then what are the connections to actually getting to this space? We already have a pretty extensive, for a place that sees snow like 5 months out of the year, we have a pretty extensive bike path system here in Rochester. And so then that also helps with the connection with pedestrians. And then just these are areas that have pretty good sidewalk connections as well beyond the bike paths. Next slide. So how are we creating that infrastructure to support micromobility? We've done a couple of projects in the more recent years. One of them is some bike infrastructure projects. We have just continued to look at where the opportunities are to have more bike lanes. We do get some pushback on that, but it is something that has remained a priority for most of the individuals on our city council and also our leadership as we continue to support sustainability directors and active transportation directors or coordinators. We have added an off-road cycle track to a pretty major street that connects downtown and to the north. And it's about probably 12 blocks in a pretty significant area. And then we continue to create trails going south on that same major street, and then connecting trails that maybe are a little disjointed right now. And we did a major update to the active transportation master plan in 2022. Next slide. I already talked a little bit about the transit villages, but I do want to just point out that one of the things that's very important to us with the transit villages is making sure that we are integrating what's already existing for bike and pedestrian paths, and also just adding them throughout the village to make sure that there's that ability to not only get to the transit villages, but also navigate through and around them. And then also this space would have some specific bike parking. So if you wanted to park your bike out here, have a way of locking it up and then hop onto a bus rapid transit to get downtown, you'd have that ability. Next slide. And you can, one more. We have done a couple of things to really encourage people in that micromobility space. One of them is that we had a bike sharing program. We were utilizing Nice Rides bikes, and then that organization kind of went away in our area. And so at that time, they actually gave us the bikes that they had used here. So we had about 200 of these bikes, and people really, really used the program. So we were able to maintain it for a few years on our own, and utilizing our check-in and check-out system through our library. And then we actually went ahead and if you go to the next slide, we actually went ahead and used those bikes from that organization, and we were able to actually gift those bikes to people. And really our goal was to give these to the people who were most in need throughout the community. So these were the people that we were seeing regularly come and check out the bikes for a week at a time. They were really using them for transportation, for work, for errands, all of that. And this slide is not fully up to date. We actually have been able to grant some more of those bikes as we're ending this program more completely. We've granted out more of the bikes, and we are working with Lime, who also has our scooter program, to bring in bikes that also have some accessibility to them, as far as they're giving us some cards so that people are able to utilize the bikes through their system at a discount. Next slide. So I've talked a little bit about the bikes and scooters. We did create an ordinance in 2020 to make sure that we were not in a position where we would all of a sudden have lots of scooters dumped on us without our having any control over them. But we then turned around and did contract with Lime for last year and this year. And then we really are working regularly with them on how to keep it an equity program. So there are definitely lots of people who rent them and ride them, but we also want to make sure that this is something that can be used for folks who are lower income, to make sure that they are able to utilize, whether it's the bikes or the scooters, for their needs as well. Next slide. I'm running a little long, so I'll just finish up here quick. But we did at one point start with an hour car program, which was basically a program where people could rent a car by the hour. They paid a monthly fee to be able to do that. They got so many hours free with their monthly fee. We started this program in December of 2019, and then of course, promptly in 2020, the pandemic came, and because this was a program we were subsidizing through the city, we actually pared it down some, And even when we came out of the pandemic and we're ramping it back up, we just found that we just didn't have the desire to have it right now. We didn't find that the people in the city had the desire, because we still are a city where most people do own their own personal cars. So it just didn't quite take off. We are hoping to bring it back at some point, but it has left Rochester for the current time. So that's my last slide. I will turn it back on over to you, and I'll wait for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of great information. If anyone has questions or comments, we'll start in the room and then, or am I cutting it short?
Chair, let's wait till all presenters have.
Oh, I misunderstand that. Okay, thank you. I thought you meant within each piece. Thank you. This is what happens when I'm in person. We'll be moving on to item number 5 on the agenda. This will be presented by Aaron Boyd, Government and External Affairs Lead with Cul-de-sac. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Aaron Boyd is the Government and External Affairs Leader at Cul-de-sac Tempe, forging partnerships with the City of Tempe for transit-oriented development and bicycle network improvement. She drives local economic development, establishing partnerships for the retail program, including a small format grocery store, acclaimed restaurant, craft coffee house, and Arizona's largest e-bike shop. Aaron introduced the cul-de-sac minority-owned small business grant program, secured external grants, and facilitated low-interest loans for local businesses. As the 2022 Tempe Bike Hero, she co-founded Tempe's chapter of Cycling Without Age, providing free rides to seniors by local volunteers. Aaron holds a Master of Arts in International Education Administration and Policy Analysis from Stanford Graduate School of Education, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations with a minor in Spanish from Stanford University. As a reminder to myself especially, we will take questions for all our speakers after the conclusion of these presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Well, I appreciate that Susan was able to share in my bio that I was a co-founder of Cycling Without Age, because Susan is my other co-founder. And so be happy to take questions about that later as well. Thank you so much for having me here today to share a little bit about cul-de-sac, which I'll share what our company is doing specifically in Tempe, but we hope this is also a model for more mobility-oriented neighborhood design. Next slide. And so what is cul-de-sac? We are building neighborhoods for people, not cars. So I appreciated the last presentation. That was a whole city being designed around how to move people rather than cars. We're building that at a neighborhood scale. And as a company, we're building our first project in Tempe, which is going to be a neighborhood for 1,000 residents with 760 apartment units. And we have about 16,000 square feet of small local business retail on site and an integrated mobility program. As a company, we're both the project developers and we're also going to be the property managers. So we will be on site to manage the property after the development is built. Next slide. And so the rise of car-free neighborhoods. Next. So what exactly is a car-free neighborhood? It's a place where people can access their daily needs without a private vehicle, and a place where the default mode of transportation is walking, biking, or shared public transportation. So it's a whole new way of looking at land utilization in building neighborhood design. Next slide. And we believe this is possible right now because of some trends. So I know also in the last presentation, we talked about the shift in remote work, which is actually, it is changing downtown cores, but it is bringing a lot of energy to neighborhood centers. And so we found that post-COVID, there are over 67% of people are now working remotely or prefer to work remotely. And so building a home environment that is walkable and accessible is in high demand. And there's also been this explosion in e-bike sales. And this is something that right now, e-bikes are actually the fastest growing mode of electric vehicles globally. And yet we see that they take up much less space, which gives us many more options in terms of how we design our cities. Next slide. And we found that residents who are interested in living at cul-de-sac are also interested in their how to reduce their carbon footprint and how to live more lightly in their communities. So carbon emissions, that transportation, as I'm sure this group knows, is the #1 source of household CO2s. And we found that residents who are choosing to live without use of their own private vehicle can reduce their carbon emissions by over 50%. And so as a company, we just asked the question, why not build a neighborhood instead of an empty parking lot? I see some smiles in the group. I know this is in the Phoenix area. We also think about the heat here. Asphalt does also attract a lot of heat. And so in the neighborhood design, we're thinking about how can, instead of using this for just parking spots, using the same amount of space for local retail, lots of fresh air, bringing in desert climate in terms of landscaping, and also a lot of density. So in that same amount of space, actually at cul-de-sac Tempe, we are having 40 housing units per acre, but we only have housing going up 3 to 4 stories high. So it's a lot of density without adding, but at a people scale. So I'll share a little bit more about cul-de-sac Tempe. I've been working on the project since 2020. So it's been a project that has been a vision of the founders for some time. And we've worked with the city of Tempe who have really been visionaries and partnering with us. This is the first ever agreement between a developer and a city for 0 residential parking. And so I'll share a little bit about the project and how it's progressed and where we are today. So it's 17 acres. We have 761 residential as well as live work units. And so those live work units will be in work and live in their studio. So those can be micro retail units. But we also have larger format retail with a grocery store, a coffee shop, a restaurant, a co-working space, and a bike shop, all located on the site. And yet with all of these things happening, we still have 55% of the neighborhood that's completely open space. If you think about it, if you have 761 apartment units, you typically need at least 760 parking spots, if not closer to 1,000. We have 150 parking spots on site. And so instead of using that space for parking, we are able to open it up for walkable paseos, parks, retail, as well as the overall benefits of reducing the carbon emissions from transportation. Next slide. Yeah, so here's some of the progress. This is an aerial view, and actually even all of those wood buildings now are also being stuccoed. So a lot can happen in a year. We were happy that I was told when I started working on this project that once Phoenix starts building, it starts building quickly. It just takes a while to get started sometimes. And we are building quite quickly. And I'm very proud to say that our first residents just moved in the month of May. So as of May 31st, we have our first fully occupied building in cul-de-sac Tempe. And so here's just another view from rendering to reality. So on one side, you can see is a rendering. The other side is actually what we have there today. So we're located right on the light rail. Here's another great view of a way that we partnered with the city of Tempe. You can see that crosswalk. That crosswalk wasn't there before. We're right at the Smith Martin Apache light rail station. But the city of Tempe saw the vision of what we were building with the transit-oriented development. We partnered and shared the cost of building a crosswalk that's timed to the light rail directly to the light rail stop. So you could be sitting and having a happy hour at Cocina Chihuahuas or having your coffee at Fire Creek Coffee in the morning see the train coming up and actually just walk right over to catch that train from that crosswalk. Okay, next slide. And it's walkable by design. We have partnered with Opticos, which is a global architecture firm as the architects of cul-de-sac, and they specialize in what they call missing middle housing. So the idea is that most housing in the US is either large apartment blocks or single family homes, but what's missing is something in the middle. It's this human scale, walkable neighborhood. And we specifically partnered to create missing middle housing at cul-de-sac Tempe. And it's also inspired by European designs, so Italian or Greece walkable paseos, where you can even see the shade that's coming down. We'll be doing shade studies, but even already, just with the construction that's done so far, we found that these walkable paseos are 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the surrounding environment. We have zero asphalt in the entire site. So even though we do have 150 parking spots for visitors and guests, even our parking lot is with decomposed granite. That's contributing to the coolness and the shade of the neighborhood design. Next slide. And so here is the site map where you can see actually that parking lot. So you can see up there on your top left, the Smith Martin Apache light rail station. And then we have our retail corridor right off that light rail. So anyone who's visiting, we would love to encourage them to come by light rail, but there is also parking spots for visitors and guests. We have our restaurant is Cocina Chihuas. If any of you are familiar with Tacos Chihuas in Phoenix, I see some heads nodding. People feel hungry. Tacos Chihuas is excellent. The purveyors are a husband-wife team. We signed all of our retail leases actually back in early 2020. So these were people who, even during COVID, when restaurants weren't exactly looking to grow, saw that being in a walkable neighborhood is good for business. That being in a walkable neighborhood is where people stroll, they stop, they're chatting with their neighbors. This is something that the local neighborhood around us can come and enjoy. Similarly, we have a grocery store that's called Street Corner Urban Market. That is Vikram Dillon, a husband and wife team. Vikram and his wife Shweta, they'll actually be operating the grocery store as a husband-wife team. And then we have Fire Creek Coffee that's based out of Flagstaff and have their first location in Tempe. And then Archer's Bikes that's based out of Mesa is opening their bike shop at cul-de-sac. Next slide. And for just a map of the area, you can see here, the black dot is the project site. So we're just about 2 miles east of downtown Tempe. So very well located between the airport, downtown Mesa, downtown Phoenix. We found that a lot of our future residents are very much looking forward to being so close to, getting to the airport or getting to all the amenities that are also in downtown Mesa and downtown Phoenix by light rail. Next slide. And this is just showing some of the kind of trends that we're building on. We're also very lucky to be in Tempe, that Tempe is already a great place to ride a bike. This is a slide showing that Tempe is 5th behind Portland, Washington, Madison, Wisconsin, and San Francisco as the share of the workforce riding their bike to work. And so it's already, and we just were named again, Tempe, a gold level bicycle city by the League of American Cyclists. And so building on that, cul-de-sac residents aren't just living in the neighborhood, but they're really transiting around the neighborhood. And all of our residents will get a free electric bike in partnership with Electric Bike, which are a Phoenix-based electric bike company. And I'm just going to cruise along here. The last piece is building a culture of active transportation. So I think we heard that, there's a lot of patterns and habits that we all have in how we get along and how we get around. And so we're making active transportation fun. Every week we have a local market where we have local makers, food trucks, music, events. We had a pop-up roller skating rink last week that residents and community members came to enjoy. But we also give any community member who joins and comes not in a car, a $5 token to use at the market. And so we're incentivizing and creating this culture of using light rail bikes and other ways of getting to cul-de-sac and enjoying the neighborhood. And so just in closing, just going to share 3 broader initiatives. So in addition to developing and building this neighborhood, I get to work on other partnerships with the city of Tempe and building a broader kind of active transportation and demand management strategy for the city of Tempe. So next slide. The first are mobility hubs, and I'm sure this group is very familiar, but the idea is to combine different modes of transportation in one location and to have a hub of different types of transportation so that it can be easier for individuals to choose other modes other than single occupancy vehicle to get around. So cul-de-sac Tempe will be the first, one of the first mobility hubs in Tempe, where we'll have car share, the light rail stop, shaded and misted pickup and drop off spots for both Lyft, Uber, and as of last week, Waymo as well, with autonomous vehicles. And we also have Bird Scooter Nest at the site. Next slide. We can keep going, but this just shows just basically how easy and how fast it is to get around the site using the whole entire site as a mobility hub for the neighborhood. And the partnerships that we have with Lyft, Valley Metro, Envoy for our electric car share, and that's rental by the hour or by the day. And then the Bird Scooters with the on-site fleet, and Archer's Bikes that's offering classes to the community, and they have used bikes, new bikes, e-bikes, regular bikes, and are already even donating bikes for the local summer bike camp for kids. Platinum Pass. So this is something that we're really proud to share. Previously, the Platinum Pass was only available to large employers in the Phoenix area. We worked with Valley Metro to ensure that multifamily housing can now offer the Platinum Pass to their residents. And so this is a new policy. Cul-de-sac will be offering the Platinum Pass to all of our residents included in their rent. So all of our residents will have unlimited rides on the light rail. We would love for other multifamily to consider doing the same. And last but not least, there's some great Department of Transportation funding right now to support active transportation. Thriving Communities is one of those, specifically to help bring in diverse voices into the transportation planning process. Cul-de-sac partnered with the city of Tempe. Next slide. And Tempe was just announced as one of 64 communities as in the Thriving Communities program. So we're looking forward to partnering with local nonprofits in Tempe, as well as this group and this body, as well as the city of Tempe, as we do a 2-year process of active transportation planning for transit-oriented complete neighborhoods. And this is to specifically create the Apache corridor as an equitable place-based transit oriented development corridor. Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Erin. Our next item, I almost got ahead of myself again. Our next item, number 6, is leveraging emerging technologies for pedestrian and cyclist safety. Item number 6 will be presented by Shu-Yao Hong, MAG's Emerging Technology Program Manager. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion. Shu-Yao Hong is the Emerging Technology Program Manager at the Maricopa Association of Governments. He leads MAG's Emerging Technology Program with the goal of enabling the region to respond and adapt to future transportation innovations. He also manages MAG's Regional Households Travel Survey effort. Prior to his current role, he worked in various technical capacities within the organization, focusing on modeling, big data, and visualization. Before joining MAG, he graduated from Arizona State University with a master's degree in geography. As a reminder to everyone, we will take questions for all of our speakers after the conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairs and members of MAG Transit Committee and Active Transportation Committee, today I will be sharing our recent efforts of leveraging emerging technologies to improve pedestrian and cyclist safety. Next slide, please. Without a crystal ball, we don't really know what disruptive technologies might come up over the next decade or two. but a new RTP recognized the need for region to adapt and respond to future transportation innovation. And therefore, MAG established an emerging technology program to provide innovation and technology as a service to our member agencies. One of our key efforts to date is to pilot emerging technologies with support from our member agencies, trying to tackle the day-to-day challenges they are facing, such as safety. Since the program's inception, we have got strong support and interest from our members, and we have piloted a wide range of emerging technologies in real-world settings and use cases across the entire region. And today I will share two of our pilot projects focusing specifically on safety issues related to access to transit stations and intersection crossing. Next slide, please. In partnership with Valley Metro and City of Phoenix and Tempe, our first pilot project aims to support the traditional road safety assessments or RSA projects around the light rail stations or streetcar stations. The RSA projects typically involve crash data analysis and site observation, but we all know that crash, especially involving pedestrian cyclists, are rare and random events, and we always hope to mitigate the trouble spot before a crash has happened. That's why analyzing near miss becomes crucial. But there's also a lack of near miss reports or incident database, and that's when computer vision and artificial intelligence analyzing video data become helpful in filling the missing pieces here. And we hope to generate insights from that to help prioritize and implement proactive safety countermeasures that in the absence of crash data or near miss report involving pedestrian and cyclists. Next slide, please. So based on feedback we got from our project partners, 6 light rail stations, as shown here, was selected for the first phase of these projects in the first half of 2021. We actually are currently having a second phase of 10 more light rail and streetcar stations using different technologies this spring. As you are all aware, a light rail station is typically situated at the median of a roadway near intersections or bus stops for connections. Naturally, it could generate a lot of pedestrian to vehicle interactions, even sometimes outside of a crosswalk. And one reason we are using drone for these particular projects is that to have a better field of view, as shown in the screenshots we took from the video here, but also to avoid the occlusions of the light rail station being in the middle of the roadway. Next slide, please. To get a comprehensive picture of the site situations, we flew the drones for 8 hours per day for 3 days for each of the stations we mentioned earlier. And that resulted in about 150 hours of high-definition videos from drones in these efforts. On a high level, we started by looking at where are the areas that we want to capture based on the feedback and based on the pedestrian activities in the roadway. On the other hand, we also try to balance that where we could fly drones safely, especially not over active traffic or pedestrian or crosswalk or sidewalk, but also have enough space for us to set up equipment and drones. We also need to work out the logistics from site and equipment setup to getting FAA approval or airport approval if we fly near Sky Harbor Airport. We're also extremely careful about the flying height. First, to mitigate any distractions this might cause to the drivers and pedestrians on the ground. So we fly in a height that is almost invisible visually and also produce very little noise to the ground. But we also want to make sure we don't collect any personal identifiable information unintentionally. That is not part of these projects. And lastly, we do also want to make sure that pedestrian cyclists are having enough pixels in the video so that they will be able to be picked up by the software in the next stage. Besides that, we obviously have all the safety and communication plan in place to keep PD jurisdictions and the nearby establishments in loop. And also we have a safety observer right next to our pilot. If there's a curious residents coming up to ask questions, we will be able to answer that safely. Next slide, please. So translating all this data to insights would be the role of the near-miss software. Next click. So using computer vision technologies, these technologies will be able to identify, track, and classify objects from the videos. And that allows it to produce lots of various traffic measures you typically see in a traffic study, such as traffic volumes, turning movement counts, user speed, and all of the above by different user types, such as car, bus, trucks, and bike and ped. Next slide. More importantly, when you have the traces of objects in space and time, you will be able to tell that how close two of them are once or in the same spot. And that's where you can identify near misses from two different objects. And based on the user type, you will be able to see if it's a near miss involving a pedestrian and cyclist or not. And this allowed us to generate lots of statistics, maps, graphs, including, for example, the trace map here, showing that how different type of objects, for example, the blue represents the vehicle traffic, and in this case, red represents the pedestrian crossing in that particular site, and how they have a conflicting point in those different maps and hotspot maps as well. Next slide. And one interesting byproducts, maybe one more click, that for each of the near miss events the system detected, we also get a short clip like this, showing that what's with the overlay information of different objects, where are the spots that the near miss occur. This is actually produced for use of validation, but actually based on feedback we heard from our project partners from cities, this is actually very helpful for them to justify to the public meetings or even to the management about the potentially investments in the countermeasures in those locations. Next slide, please. So a couple of key takeaways from this pilot before I jump into the next one is near miss analysis. We found it provided additional insights quantitatively and qualitatively to the traditional RSA projects. It's really supporting the field review and crash data analysis that RSA team did. We initially thought that maybe the field observation of a few hours, we might be missing something there. But when we cross-reference the near miss analysis with the experts' observation in the field, we found out they actually align fairly well. So it's a good validation of our RSA approach as well. On the other hand, as I mentioned, the near miss video are really a vivid example for showing to the public and management. That's one of the feedback we heard from our member agencies partner in this project as well. Last but not least, while drones could be very helpful for other use that require a shorter duration, we found it's logistically challenging to use drone for long duration in these particular cases. And on the other hand, I think for the future, we were trying to find a sweet spot that we might need to fly drone for less because the incremental marginal benefits of having them more might not outweigh the costs and logistic challenges to having drone for 24 hours per site. Next slide. So switching to the second project, it's in partnership with City of Phoenix and Tempe. In this particular projects, we aim to try to do a non-intrusive bike and ped detection and counting projects. As mentioned, the objective are really twofold. First is to detect pedestrians and bicyclists in the crosswalk, and then potentially to extend the green time for them when it is nearing the end of green time. So this is kind of an alternative to the physical push button that are prone to hardware failure and also require active action from a user. On the other hand, we also look forward to using these technologies for a bike and ped count for active transportation planning purpose. I think my colleague, Dr. Wang Zhang, presented to the Active Transportation Planning Committee last year about the regional counting effort as well. So when we work with City of Phoenix and Tempe, we piloted 7 different technologies as shown on the map here. We try to utilize existing equipment as much as possible or using the loaner equipment from vendors during the short duration of pilot in the first half of 2021. Next slide. So briefly, we put up an evaluation plan, but I just want to highlight a few points here. First of all, we realized that each different technologies all require initial setup and training for the end users from cities and traffic departments, because you don't need to set up the detection zone properly, so you don't detect pedestrian cyclists in places that you don't need them to count for detection purpose. On the other hand, we also try to be mindful that the extension of green light is actually caused by the technologies for the bike and ped, but not for the vehicles nearby or for vehicles that are turning right turn during the right time for on the crosswalk. Although I will only show a couple of slides about aggregate results, we did test the technologies in different lighting conditions as well, because we all know that for the video-based solutions, they tend to not perform very well in the nighttime for obvious reason because of lighting. Next slide, please. So overall, the bike and ped counts we based on the counting efforts, we realize that pad counts are usually reliable, but the byte counting is still a challenge. You'll see two solution doesn't have numbers here because they actually cannot separate bike and pad in this case. And for the performance of bike count, usually it's because a bike is harder to detect and sometimes being mixed up with a pedestrian as well. That's one observation we noticed from this study. Next slide, please. So overall, in terms of detecting bike and pad in the crosswalk and extending a green light, we actually found out most solutions actually it's not having an issue with that. They all achieve fairly good accuracy in the end of the day, except one. Next slide, please. So with that, two really key takeaways for a wider future deployments of similar technologies for all of you would be, first, we realize that significant training is needed to adjust to the new technologies and environment, because it's always there will be always some learning curve to adopt the new technologies, particularly in this case. And secondly, a couple of suggestions we have for future deployments will be lighting conditions will be critical to achieve the desired results. And also the training for the algorithm, not the staff, is also important. Some of the technologies require some startup time to be able to run and train first before they will be achieving their ideal accuracy. And lastly, the wider detection zone are also recommended so that to not only limit the detection zone around the crosswalk specifically. Next slide, please. With that, thank you for your time. And here's my contact information along with my colleagues who are also a part of the projects. We're happy to take any questions after these sessions or offline via emails. Thank you again.
Thank you. So now we'll go, I would think for Q&A, we would hopefully go in order from maybe group it by presentation, if that works for everyone. So please, if you're in the room, please raise your hand. Or I don't know who's monitoring the hands being raised. Oh, thank you. Justin Weldy, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman, my first question in regards to the first presentation was the large number of parking spaces. Do we have an estimate on private versus public parking spaces there to help us better determine our needs for a smaller community?
Thank you, Justin. Is this a question for Jamie in Minnesota?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for that. I would actually have to go back and do some figuring. I know that we often will just mention that there's 3,500 parking spots within about a 5-mile walk. But as far as private versus public, I'd have to go back and figure that out. Feel free to reach out to me if you want some more data on that. I know I've got it. I just didn't happen to include it in here. So feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to send it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Marty. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My question for Jamie is, I'm just hoping you can go into a little bit more detail on what all constitutes the transit villages at the end of lines for the bus rapid transit system.
Sure, absolutely happy to. So those are still in design. So for the most part, we don't have anything that's particularly defined yet, but the whole goal behind a transit village is to have a space where you have something like a rapid transit system, but you also have housing, you have retail, you have parking, because that's part of the whole deal with having the rapid transit line there. And the idea is to make it feel actually, it's interesting that I'm up at the same time as can't remember the name of the organization down in Tempe, but I've actually looked at that structure a number of times as we're starting to talk about this, because it's a really great structure with the idea that people living there probably won't need a car. Like there's no reason to have one when you literally have this right there. So the idea is to make it really a multi-use sort of walkable environment that also happens to have quite a bit of parking, like you'd see similar to near a light rail in Minneapolis, for example. We have a couple of large parking spaces along that route. So really trying to make it a place and not just parking is really the most important component of that. So we'd love to see restaurants there. We'd love to see like things to do, but also those things that people always need to do at the end of the day. Like, is there a small grocery store that has your deli, your dairy department, and you can pick up a loaf of bread? Is there a dry cleaner? You know, like some of those things that would be really nice to do quickly before when you get off the light rail or get off the rapid transit, grab those things and then head to your car before you head home. So really still in the design phase of that. And of course, it'll be dependent on who we partner with for some of that development. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Oh, go ahead, Earl.
This is Earl Ratledge with the Coalition Arizona Bicyclists. I'm wondering if you have at your hubs like that, if you have coordinated with any like vendors or anything for last mile capabilities for people that need that little bit past the end of the light rail or past the end of the bus route?
Yeah, so like I say, these are still under development. We actually are looking at, we're going through the FTA process for our bus rapid transit right now. And definitely we will be working closely. Right now we're partnering with Lime, but we'll definitely be working closely with them, or if we have other shared mobility partners. That also is probably looking like the best time to bring some type of a like a car share or an hour car sort of system back, is once we have that a bit more established. Because what it does is it gives those folks that option of having, I can get to the transit station and rent a car and go run a bunch of errands and then head home. There's a number of really great ideas floating around about that. And we will definitely be putting our micromobility hubs at these larger hubs as well.
Thank you. Do we have any others in the room before we ask for people that are online? Anyone? Okay. So any online comments or questions?
Yeah, Grant has a question.
Go ahead, Grant.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. For cul-de-sac, appreciate what you're trying to accomplish there, but in our area, the biggest need is for Amazon trucks deliveries. How do you handle moving in and out, furnitures, Amazon, other delivery facilities, things of that nature? You're a clustered development with parking not anywhere close. End of question.
Thank you, Grant. And I should have spent a bit more time on the slide where we do have 150 parking spaces that are just adjacent to where the retail is located. And in the grocery store, we have a large mail room. So the mailroom has an Amazon package locker as well as cool lockers as well for groceries that might be delivered for our residents. And we have essentially parking spots for move-in that can be booked in advance. And so actually there's kind of porous areas surrounding the entire site where those move-in, move-out parking spots can be booked in advance of move-in to facilitate that. So we think our residents can actually even get closer to some of their pods than if you were going into a large multifamily apartment. But it is a tricky thing. Package delivery, we have our first residents moving in, and I think we just did an analysis. There was over 64 Amazon packages delivered this last week. And so package storage is significant, as well as actually coordinating with the different package delivery folks. So talking to UPS, talking to USPS, talking to Amazon, and helping them get access to the building is actually one of the biggest challenges we're working through right now logistically. So it's not easy, but we have at least figured out where they can park. Now getting them to the right place inside the development is, the next step.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online with questions? More for Jamie, but we can jump ahead if we need to. No one else? All right. Anyone? Okay, so the next set of questions will focus on, since Aaron's already up here, if you'd like to join us, if we have any in the room questions or comments on the cul-de-sac presentation for Aaron. Go ahead, Earl.
Yeah, I'm wondering, get back to your package delivery thing. Is there a way that you can coordinate with the package delivery companies to consolidate the orders and send less trucks so you don't see 2 Amazon trucks there at the same time delivering?
It's a great idea. We are starting to collect data. Like I said, just our residents moved in 2 weeks ago. So we have our first weeks of data about delivery. And the nice thing about being in a neighborhood like this is that you do get to know your neighborhood delivery men. So I think talking to them and talking to them about, I know also we've even talked about coordinating with our residents on delivery. So I know when you get Amazon Prime, you can have all your packages choose to deliver in one day. So maybe there's some way that we could do that as a community. I think that's a great idea.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go, Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I noticed in the rendering, there looked like a protected bike lane in front of the building, but I didn't see it in the actual picture. Is there plans still to put that in and then follow up from that? Is there are there any off-street paths or protected bike lane network that residents will be able to have access to connect to?
Great question. So the protected bike lane is not there yet, but we are working with the city of Tempe. It is in the roadmap to be able to provide that protected bike lane. So I actually was just having a meeting this morning with the head of Tempe Transportation. And then leading the site, there's the Smith Road that goes to Tempe Marketplace that then connects to the Rio Salado multi-use path. That north-south route has been part of the Bike It plan for the last 40 years or 25 years. It's been on the docket, but it wasn't intended to be built until the year 2040. But we actually partnered with our local community members in the Alegre and Escalante communities, along with cul-de-sac, with the city of Tempe to effectively, we were able to move up the planning of that bike lane that is now going to start construction later this year. And at least as of the drawings I saw this morning, there's protected bike lane on that. And so that would get residents directly from cul-de-sac to Tempe Marketplace. And now we're also working with some Vestar representatives about how to get that residents essentially safely through Tempe Marketplace to the Rio Salado multi-use path.
Hey, Carol, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just curious now that you actually have people moving in, and I assume people about to move in, who's coming. Who's coming? Age group, people with children, people without children, seniors, not seniors, like what are you seeing?
Mm-hmm. So we're a fair housing community, which means that we're open for anyone who applies. And so we have seen interest from all the backgrounds that you mentioned, which is lovely. So everywhere. And then I'd say one interesting fact that I'll mention is that over 60% of the wait list. So when I joined the company back in 2020, we opened a wait list where anyone could put down $100 deposit to hold their place in line so that when we open leasing, they would be the first to know to lease apartments. And over 60% of that list was actually from outside of Arizona. And so it's, everything from snowbirds to young professionals, young families across the board.
I'm going to follow up. It can't be an even distribution. Are you seeing trends of more people with families, people not with family? There's got to be some kind of trend going on there.
Yeah, I would say just from, kind of residents' privacy and fair housing perspective, it's just important that we're really open to everyone. And so trend wise, we are seeing interest from all backgrounds who are coming to the neighborhood.
All right. Sounds like it's too early to tell with your brand new residents as well. Reed, go ahead.
Yeah. Is there something in the contract that if somebody owns a car when they move in, they have a certain time limit to do that? And then if you find out they're parking around the corner, you just kick them out?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a tricky part of the contract. So it is in the lease. If residents do have a vehicle, it just has to be listed in the lease, and they sign as part of the contract that it cannot be parked within a 1/4 mile radius of the neighborhood. And part of that is our agreement with the city of Tempe that our surrounding neighborhoods don't want all of a sudden our residents to be parking all on their streets and have street parking now covered everywhere. So we have parking monitoring. And then it's also included as part of the contract. So residents can choose to keep their vehicle. It just either has to be parked at, in a private location or outside of, a 1/4 mile from the site. But we are seeing that most of our residents are choosing to live without a private vehicle because I'd say there's a lot of options for folks who have cars. There's a lot of people who are interested in living without a car, and this is one of the few apartments that's designed specifically for that.
Heather? Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just curious if all of the units are being offered at market rate, or if some of them are also being offered for low income.
They're all market rate.
Justin?
Madam Chair, thank you. My question is, and this may not be the place for it in this conversation, is related to the different apps for mapping. We have recently noted that if you Google one place or another in Fountain Hills, it takes you through the areas we would prefer truck traffic not be. How are you addressing that in this particular application, if you would?
Also, literally as of this week, we've found that Apple Maps has been updated and another kind of map has been updated, but not Google Maps. And so we've submitted actually to Google Maps different forms of maps to show the updates in the neighborhood. And there's showing a street that doesn't exist anymore, for example. And we're having our whole team go online and submit to Google to try to update the map to do that. And I'd be happy to follow up to share the process that we've done to do that. Oh, okay.
Do we have anyone online that has a cul-de-sac question for Aaron? No one?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. I have one follow-up. I just thought as I was listening to the others, are you planning, or do you already have information on anyone that works at any of the businesses or of your own staff, how the different ways that they're traveling to get to and from the site?
Yeah, in fact, our company actually provides to our teammates, anyone who lives car-free in Tempe, we provide a subsidy of $500 a month to our employees. So it's actually incentivized as part of our own company benefits. And so we have found that that's definitely incentivizing a lot of our employees to live in the area. E-bikes is a favorite on our team. I think they're very flexible. They get you where you need to go. But we also use light rail. The Orbit bus is another favorite. We're always sharing tips and favorite routes with each other. One thing that I've loved, so once again, the residents have just been there for just under a month, but every single weekend we've done different mobility outings with our residents. So we did a bike ride on the canals and on the Rio Salado multi-use path. So there's a couple individuals who moved from out of state who aren't familiar with the area. So that was showing how to get around. This weekend, they took the Orbit bus to Tempe Marketplace as an outing. I think the weekend before that, we took the light rail to Mesa and walked around downtown and actually went to Heat Labs makerspace. And so we're actually creating these resident events to showcase different ways of getting around, especially in initiating or showcasing for individuals who might not be as familiar with the area.
Great, thank you. Do we have any others?
Yeah, I
Sometimes
believe
one
Grant
question leads
has
to
another
new one.
question. I do have another question. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Regarding your parking again for cul-de-sac. It's related to most of these younger people that this type of development attracts a lot of. Don't know your demographics, but I'm sure there will be quite a few. They have friends. Those friends have cars. they like to party together. So how do you handle the parking for people that want to come over and visit?
Yeah, we do have guest parking. So each of our residents, we realize that that's a huge benefit. We want our residents to invite their friends to party and to hang out and to enjoy the local retail on site. And so we do have guest parking for all of our residents to invite friends. And there's 150 parking spaces on site, which is actually over parked by code for the retail that we have.
So the 150, not for the residents at all, but for the retail and visitors.
That's correct. Yeah. And even, for example, let's say residents have friends or family coming from out of town to stay. We have what we call bookable suites. So if you're in a 1-bedroom apartment, you might not have a guest room. So we actually have extra guest rooms that our residents can book a guest room, have a friend or family visit from out of town, and then they don't have to pay for a 2-bedroom apartment year round if they don't need one. They can just what we call expand your home on demand and get an extra bedroom as needed.
And the 150 parking stalls will accommodate their vehicles.
Currently,
correct?
yes. Yes.
Seems a little tight to me, but okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Grant, I also like to party, but I'm not young. And when I party, I'm alone at home with my dogs, usually sleeping.
I can relate.
All right. Go ahead, Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett, City of Mesa. As one brings up another question, I was curious. Some of these look like they're upstairs units. E-bikes aren't light. There's other forms of micromobility that are great, but also not particularly great to pull upstairs. So I was curious. I know you're non-car, but maybe there's BMW makes an all-electric scooter or something. Like, is there stuff that's more smaller space, or even up to heavier e-bikes, cargo bikes? Do you have a space to accommodate those?
We specifically have bike garages built in the neighborhood for electric bikes or regular bikes. So those are in some public spaces. We have over 1,000 parking spots for bicycles specifically designed throughout the site. But in addition to that, so you saw some of those second floor units. So many of the units are on the first floor, and then we have some that start on the second and our second, third floor kind of townhouse style. But under the stairwells, we have little individual storage units as well. So they're almost like mini garages. So residents can also book their own private storage unit if they would want one, in addition to some of the public bike garages that we have.
And I assume they're all electrified?
They are.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this presentation before we move on to the final one? All right, thank you, Aaron. So now we'll ask for comments or questions around the room for the leveraging emerging technologies for pedestrian and cyclist safety. Does anyone have, please raise your hand if you have a question for Chu Yao Hong. Go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, Chuyo, at one point in your presentation, you talked about counting pedestrians and bikes in crosswalks. I commuted for, let's say, 45 years, never ever rode my bike in a crosswalk because that takes you out of your line. Was this at a shared use path location, or help me understand why you're counting bikes that are in the crosswalks?
Sure, chairs and members of active transition and transit committees. Yes, to answer that questions, for those sites we mentioned earlier, they are all intersections, not shared use path, I believe. So the technologies can actually count bikes, even though it's that's actually one of the recommendations that we want to set up the detection zone a bit wider than the crosswalk. So if a cyclist is riding the bike through the crosswalk nearby the crosswalk, it can be captured as well. So I hope that partially answer your questions as well. And the other part of that answer is that turning movement counts of cyclists and pedestrians are also important to collect as well. So that's why the other reason why we aims to do the counting in this project.
Yeah, thank you. My concern was that you'd be missing the cyclists that were riding in the bike lane if you were just counting the ones in the crosswalk?
Yeah, I think there are some technologies that can also count bikes traveling on the travel lanes if it's a shared use length. So, but for this particular project, due to the scope, we try to look at intersection operation specifically.
Earl has a question.
Oh, yeah, thank you. If, I know it says that you tested the different methodologies for the different tools for doing the counts. Have you made any decisions? Are any of those going to be moved into production, or is it just kind of in the testing phases now?
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is we have a final report available upon us. So any of you can get in touch with me and my colleague to get the reports, so that we hope to share the lessons learned we got from these projects to the entire group. And one thing I kind of touched on briefly is that what we learned from this efforts is also one of the input to our region-wide bike and count efforts that was led by my colleague, Dr. Wang Zhang, from our transportation data program. I think that effort was previously reported to the Active Transportation Committee in last fall. So that's how we see the knowledge we learned from pilot projects will be further explored.
Marty?
Thank you, Chair. Marty, Zeke Valley Metro. I was excited to see the drone footage that you were using to look at some of the light rail access at the stations. We have similar efforts going on at the agency. So I just wanted to make the comment that I'm excited to see it, and I'll definitely be following up with you to see if we can work together and kind of bolster both efforts to get some really good outputs from it. Thanks.
For a comment.
Garrett?
Garrett Topham, City of Mesa. I may have missed this. Are these piloted or tethered drones?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Chairs and members of committees. So we actually try two different ways. First is a battery swapping. Because of long durations, one battery will not be able to sustain the entire durations we want. So one of our consultant team actually use battery swapping, meaning that every 20 minutes or so, they need to fly down the drones, change the batteries and fly it back. You also need to have a ground power generator set up to charge the batteries in that case. The other consultant team actually do a tethered drone solutions, in which essentially the drone is connecting wire to a ground power source, also rely on power generators. And that's actually one reason why we mentioned that logistically, actually doing this in long duration can be very challenging.
I would even think on a windy day that can impact the drones, but I don't know how to fly drones at all. So any other questions or comments in the room? Do we have anyone online?
Chairs, we do not have any more questions online.
All right, thank you. I really found it interesting. Oh, I'll just make my general comment that they're trying 7 different technologies for the detection of people walking and biking. Can't wait to see more about that. Thank you. So we will move on to requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests by a committee member for a future agenda item for either of your committees? I don't see any, so please reach out if you think of something later to either Kay or Hannah. This is a reminder that the next Active Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 15th, 2023 at 1 o'clock through teleconference, since a reminder that the July meeting will not be taking place. And at this time, I will call the MAG Active Transportation Committee meeting adjourned at 2:29.
Thank you. And the next Transit Committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 7th at 1 p.m. via teleconference. With no further business, the MAG Transit Committee meeting is also now adjourned at 2:29.
Can I say something?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Reed Kempton, Maricopa County. I just want to thank the staff for putting this agenda together. I think it's one of the more interesting agendas we've had for this joint meeting. And we had really good speakers. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all the coordination too.